All right, let's talk about some of these other tools right up across the top that are key to working in Moto. One of the main things I want you to understand first is this work plane. It's this little icon right down here. Well, that's part of it. If I hold the Alt or the Option key and click and drag, I can rotate around. All right, and this basically is a GPS to Moto. Think of it like that. It's going to show you which direction you're looking. All right, and when I started using Moto all those years ago, trying to get used to this single interface was a little bit daunting, but it was easier to do because I had the work plane. This white grid right here is actually the work plane. You can see it right there. And you'll see up here at the top there's a work plane button. You can reset, you can offset, and later on we're going to actually use this to control the location of things, such as centers for an item. But what this will do will allow us to actually build in the right orientation. So for instance, you'll see that there's a little gray box right between the Y and the X. That means we're actually building on the Z axis. And see that tall grid right there? So if I take a box and I click and drag, I'm actually building down the Z axis. Easy enough. Well, if I wanted to build a flat one, all you do is hold the Alt or the Option key, rotate around just a little bit, and you'll actually see just like that. See how that gray box slips to the bottom? Click that box again, and now I'm building on the Y axis. Simple as that. So that's just the very, very basic of the work plane. Another thing in this panel is the Action Center. All right, what is the action? Well, the action of your mouse. Just keep that in mind. So for instance, let me get rid of this. I'm going to hold the Shift key and add just a little torus here. All right, if I go ahead and choose my Rotate tool, it automatically goes right to the center. Okay, now that center can be moved. And when I say center, I'm looking at the 0, 0, 0, XYZ. Right down the middle. You can see these dark crosshairs in the grid. Okay. By default, that object that I created lives right there. In this item list, there's a little corner, dark corner. What that means is if you click and hold, you'll see pivot and center. Well, if I choose center, you'll actually see a little dot come up. All right. Well, that center can be moved around. So that, let's say, I move over here, and I press E to get my rotate tool. Let me go back to item real quick. Now I'm going to be rotating from where that center is, rather than from the middle of the object. But sometimes you don't want to move that center. You actually want to keep it in the middle of the object or where its origin was. But you still want to rotate from one of those points. Well, that's where an Action Center comes in. So if I click and select that, there's a number of different ways I can do this. I can choose automatic. Now automatic allows me to click anywhere I want and place my tool. In this case, I'm using rotate. Well, that's great. It can be a little troublesome, but it's not often as automatic as you might think. So just be careful with that. Selection, if I had a selection made, I would choose that as my action. But let's go down to element. And what element allows me to do, if I press E again for my rotation, notice as I move in here and I move my mouse over, see how there's elements highlighting, an element being a polygon, an edge, or point? Well, let me come over here to this edge, click, and now my rotation is based on that selection point. It's one of my favorite things when moving models around and positioning them and using them for an animation is because I can get them directly in place exactly as I need. So that's using element. You can use the screen view that you're looking at, the origin, which is, of course, where our center is right now, and even just selection. So let me go back to this real quick. So here's a selection of 4, Action Center selection. Press E, and it will put my cursor there for my rotation right within the average of those. So really great way to work. We're going to use those throughout as needed. And Action Center is kind of an as needed tool. So keep that in mind. You don't always have to work with that unless you need to. So next is symmetry. So let me go ahead and clear this out. We're going to hit close all. We don't need to save that. Press the A key, fit everything to view, and hold the Shift key again, and let's add a ball. So with symmetry, and right now defaulting on the X being left and right, when we go ahead and we select, let's say, some polygons on the left, they are automatically selected on the right. If I choose bevel, and I click and I bevel, it's happening on both sides. So you can see this is a great way to make characters and sometimes machinery and things that need to be duplicated on the same side. But one thing that's important to understand is that whatever you do on the left happens on the right or vice versa. But they have to be the identical position. All right, so if, let's say, I take a couple of these points and polygons and I kind of, let me turn this off real quick, and I kind of move these around just using my element move. So just press T on the keyboard. You can click any element and just kind of move them around. I'm doing that a little bit too much, of course, but I'll give you an idea. So I put symmetry on, and then I want to go select something. Oh, see, it's not selecting on the other side. Darn it. Well, that's because those points and polygons on the right side are not equal to those on the left. Under the Geometry tab, there is the Symmetry tool all the way at the bottom. Select that, then click and drag. And you'll see the model adjust itself and equal out those sides. Now if I go back to polygon selection, now my symmetry works. Okay, so you may think your model is 100% accurate on the negative and positive X or Y or Z, but take a very close look if it's not and use the symmetry tool to fix. All right, let's talk about fall off. Fall off is a lot of fun. Let's turn symmetry off. Fall offs are going to be used for all kinds of things. You can actually use them for dynamics now, use them for modeling, things like that. And there's a number of different ones. I've shown noise before to some people. I'm going to press the D key and subdivide this a couple of times. And with a noise fall off, I'm going to press R to get my scale tool. And then I'm going to actually scale this model. But look what happens. It's almost like I'm turning into a rock, right? Well, a noise fall off actually puts noise into the environment, so to speak, into my scene, and my scale is actually scaling with that noise fall off, with that noise in the environment. All right, so if I want to use linear, I'll take my right mouse and I'll click and drag, and notice that I'll go a little higher so you can see it. Notice that this fall off tool is fatter on one end and skinnier on the other. So what I'm doing is I'm choosing a fall off mode, and in this case linear, then I'm choosing a tool such as scale, and then I'm scaling. But notice that my scale isn't equal. That's because I have a fall off. And this fall off tool says less down here, that's the smaller end of that, more up here, that's the fatter end of that. You can also interactively grab that fall off and move things around. If I bring it all the way down, you'll see that, okay, well, that's really what I did, but with the fall off, I'm not using as much of that scale at the bottom. So it's actually a really terrific tool for modeling, adjusting your polygons, whatever you need. The fall offs are really terrific. Now, there's even more in here. I mean, that was just linear and noise. There's a radial fall off, which you use quite a bit. So you select radial, right click to open it up. Make sure, though, you get it actually in 3D, like that. Okay. And so this is the fall off area. And if I hit W for move, and I go ahead and I move, well, only that area with inside that fall off is moving. Constrains everything to there. Which is kind of fun. And then you can move the fall off around. It's a great way to make like bumps in a carpet or imperfections in a surface. Okay, so that's just using fall offs on a simple level. They can actually be built into the schematic tools and really just taken to a whole nother level. Finally, we've got some snapping up here, and what snapping does is, well, it snaps the object. Well, that doesn't tell you a whole lot, does it? Well, snapping allows us to align and set up objects, points, edges, and polygons based on any particular math. Makes things a lot easier when you're making precise motions, movements, and models. So if I have an object here like a box, I can pull that out, and let's just extend that a bit like that. All right, and we'll choose this, hit W, and notice that when I move that polygon, it's snapping and smacking against there, so it's lining right up. Now, there's a lot more to this, and if you open up the snapping options here, you can see I'm snapping right now to the vertex and the edge. So that's what it's seeing. But let's pin this too, so we can keep that open. When I do that, I can still move past it, but it's helping me align that. So it's great when you got objects that you want to place right on the ground. You can snap to a polygon if you want. You can snap to a grid, so that grid space in the background, which is really nice. Or you can use a fixed grid, and I've done this for a number of different things. Makes it really easy to line things up. So here's a good example. If we use a fixed grid and we come up here to our curve tool, for instance, when I select the curve tool, it's very easy to just line up these points. Whereas normally before, if I was just kind of free-forming, it would be very hard to make them in a straight line, let's say, because they're not snapping. They would just be free-floating all over. So here, let me turn off snapping and I'll show you. Like this, and I'm just kind of like this, and like this, and I'm just sort of trying to get these lined up. Well, with snapping, I can actually just do it very precisely. And you can very easily come into this panel right here and set the grid size. You can make it very minute. You can set a larger distance and so on. All right, so snapping tools, often very good. Been around for a little while. They get even better with every version. All right, let me clear this out. File, close all. All right, just a couple more things talking about this interface and usability. We talked a little bit about a work plane, and we're going to go back to that in just a minute. But as we're working through, there's another button up here. Now, this is not necessarily something new, but it is new the way it's been implemented. It's called Select Through. All right, and I showed you earlier how we can go and select the item itself from the item list, select a tool like Move, and we can move it around. We can select polygons, select some polygons, select the Move tool, move it around, and so on. Well, Modo in the past, the way it would kind of work, and still does, select some polygons or points or edges, select Move, move them, drop the tool, click to deselect, select some others, select Move, move the tool, and so on. Okay, so it gets a little cumbersome. Well, there was this thing called Select Through, and it's right here. It says Turn Select Through mode on. It used to be down here in the pipeline. And what it is, it's a button now that you can actually just access right up at the top of the screen. If you press a semicolon, which is right next to the L key on your keyboard, that will actually turn it on. But in order to use it, you have to choose a tool. So in this case, when I chose Rotate, for instance, you could choose Move. And you press that semicolon or just click on the button, you get Select Through. Well, what does that mean? Well, let me do it this way. Let me go back here to Move. And what I want to do is select a few polygons, select Move, and make sure Select Through is on. So now I can move some points or polygons, whatever I've chosen. I can come over here, select some more, and do it. I don't have to actually drop the Move tool. So if I'm just moving a bunch of polygons, I'm not worried about those extra steps. Okay, and I don't know a lot of people that really used it much. Actually, I didn't, because it was honestly so buried into the program. So now that it's out, it's actually something I would use a lot more often. So especially when I'm tweaking. If you're doing little rotations, you select a rotation, simply go like this, and rotate pops back up again. Okay, so essentially it just lets you keep the tool on without dropping it. And that works for vertex mode as well. So you select some points. I can use my scale tool, scale that down. Come over here, select some more points. Let me put that back on. See, wasn't on. Select some more points and scale those and so on. All right, so very nice little tool. The next thing is our work plane. Now, I talked earlier about the little icon representation down here, and that shows which axis you're working on, the very bottom left of the screen. But the work plane, you can actually reset it, align to selection, and a few other things. So what I'm going to do is show you how this can be used. So let's say we've got this crazy little bad donut. Choose rotate. It's rotating right from the center. All right, and maybe I just want to rotate like this. All right, and for whatever reason now, I need to actually take a couple of these polygons and move them out. So a couple like this. Well, if I choose my Move tool, that Move tool is aligning to the work plane, and the work plane is Y up and down, X left and right, and Z back and forth. Well, with the work plane allows me to change that. Now, certainly I could go to my Action Center and use some of those, but depending on what I'm modeling and how I'm animating, I'm going to do things differently. So what I can do is click this and say Align Work Plane to Selection, and you'll see that work plane change to some crazy angle. When I press the Move tool, well, now my Move tools are properly aligned. because I changed the work plane. The other benefit of changing his work plane is when we're doing more hierarchical type stuff, setting up robots and rigs and things like that. You can come in and then you can actually rotate the work plane if you want, maybe 20 degrees, something like that. You can come in and edit the work plane and punch in a bunch of numeric values for the center rotation. And you can then work plane tool, put that on, and come in and start adjusting the work plane itself in terms of position and rotation and center. Now I usually just come in and do something very similar to align the work plane and go back and reset it. So it's a very nice addition to Modo when it first came out, compared to many other 3D programs. It allows us to work in kind of this third dimension, which we don't often have because our screens are very flat. We're very 2D, X, Y, and Z. And, in the past, we always had quad views in pretty much every program. Modo came along and started doing everything in a single view, and that was thankfully to the work plane. So just an overview of this whole interface. Over on the top, we've got some presets for sculpting. We've got a sculpt panel we can pull up in our model tab, and you can make your own interface. You can come in, clear this out entirely, and then start adding your own interface. And you simply do that by coming in, going to Windows, adding a new window, and then in the top right of that window, there's a little button right here, a little arrow. Right click, and here are all of the panels. So here's a model view. And then I can take that corner right here, that little dot in the corner, click and drag that and drop it in. And then change this to a data list. Let's say a shader tree. Take the corner and I'm going to put it down like this. All right, so I'm not going to get into this too much. I've done this almost in every course, so I don't want to repeat that too much, but it's a way you can build your own interface. It's really nice. And the way I would do it, I would probably come in here and create a new layout with this plus up here, and then build a very simplified one. And ones I've done in the past are ones that are very, very simplified because, which gives me an opportunity to show you this, I can hold Control Space and get to left, right, back, bottom views like this. So I do that quite often. I can use Control 1 to toggle lights, locators, cameras, and so on. Control 2 to change my views, like that. Control 3, and I can get to Tools, Graph Editor, Shader Tree, and so on. This works anywhere throughout Modo. You don't have to have a custom interface. Control 4, I get to my topology pen, bridge, and so on. And again, I'm holding down Control and 4 at the same time. And then there's Control 5, go to different modes. All right, so let's even Control 6 right there. And this will be your visibility from your options panel. Control 7 isn't mapped. So you have 6 options right there that you can use. So if you start learning those keyboard equivalents, you can create an interface that's very wide open like this and work in a very minimal view. The other thing I've done with this is make a nice interface for a dual screen. So I've set up 2 panels. All right, so again, just layout, clear, start adding windows. And the last thing is palettes. I can add a palette, let's say a material editor. What's cool about a palette is that you can hit the tilde key, which is 1 over from the number 1 above the tab key on your keyboard. And you can just pop that open. And again, this is one I've used on a secondary monitor. So I'll just slide that over onto the other monitor, and then I'll just hit my tilde key and all my panels will come up. So, all my palettes will come up. All right, so just a quick overview on the interface. Let's move on and get into some more intricate tools in Modo 901.